Hi, perhaps you recognize me. It's your favorite president.
We will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
I mean,
I know you want to ban our national flags, but we're going to wave you goodbye.
What does confrontational mean? It means you fight for what you believe.
Enough was enough! And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother!
It is not merely our privilege to be strong, it is our duty to be strong.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Commanding the Narrative. My name is Stephen Tripp. Packed house tonight with some fantastic gentlemen, some of my good friends. Mr. Paul Vallejo, how are you, Paul?
Great, thanks.
And Chris DeBruyne, how are you tonight?
Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And Mr. Pink. How are you, Richard?
I'm good.
I told the boys you're just here for the comic relief and someone to abuse and yell out and cop some abuse back from.
Okay.
I asked a simple question. Who am I here to disagree with? Who am I here to disagree with? Let's go.
Yes, Richard. The clear answer is Richard. I've copped enough abuse over the last couple of weeks. So
Really?
Didn't you watch those ones, Richard?
Yeah.
So just to kick off, I've actually got a lot to talk about quickly. I'll get it out of the way. If you want to support us, head to Buy Me a Coffee and throw us a few dollars there. It helps to pay for the stream. And also, as Katie McCallum loves hearing me say, it puts a warm, fuzzy feeling in my stomach. So please, if you can support us, head to Buy Me a Coffee. Also, if you want to get your own ex-candidates or Commanding the Narrative t-shirt, you can head to xcandidates.t-shirt.net.au and get your own San Bruno t-shirt. I know you've got one of those and you wear it to bed, Richard. And a whole bunch of other great t-shirt designs there. Or if you want to stay up to date with everything that we're doing with Commanding the Narrative or ex-candidates or articles that I might write, head to commandingthenarrative.com. You hit the sign up link at the top right hand corner. You'll get a weekly newsletter. Have you been getting those newsletters, Richard? Have you been reading them?
Yes.
Are you impressed?
I am.
Good. Very good. So sign up to the newsletter. Commandingthenarrative.com is really the place to go if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening. If you can't find our stuff on social media or whatever, head to commandingthenarrative.com. Now, a couple of events I need to let you know about, some of which you two gentlemen are involved with as well. The first one's in Oberon. So if you head to the Lake Oberon Estate website, lakeoberonestate.com.au, hit the upcoming events tab, you'll come to this. It's a climate change and energy solutions symposium. Now, the people that are involved in this free event, if you can make your way out to Oberon or if you live close by, I encourage you to come out. Professor Ian Plime is going to be speaking, Dr. Alan Moran, Grant Piper, the chairman of the National Rational Energy Network. Mr. Paul Vallejo is going to be speaking about all things nuclear energy. I'm sure that's going to be amazing, Paul.
A pleasure. Looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it too. Tony, who owns the property, he's going to be speaking. He's ex-RAF electronic engineer and software designer. He's going to be speaking about a whole bunch of issues, and I'll be hosting it as well. So if you can head out to Oberon free event, you're more than welcome to come out and enjoy it. I think it's going to be a fantastic day. And also, I know we talked about it in June, the Environment and Energy Forum. If you follow the Facebook page, you would know that we announced a new forum coming up in September, the 29th of September. It's a Sunday between 1 and 5 p.m. We're going to do it all again. We've been invited out to Western City in Guildford, right near Chris Bowen's electorate. So I think we need to really send a statement to that guy and some of the politicians in the area that we're not happy, and a lot of people that are living in rural and regional areas that are confronted with this reckless rollout of wind, solar, offshore wind farms, all these projects that are happening, the waste that's involved, the amount of money that's involved. We're not happy about it. So please, if you want to head to the Eventbrite and type in Environment and Energy Forum Guildford, it should come up, or head to the Facebook page and get your ticket. Craig Kelly's been announced as a speaker, and Steve Christou, also the Cumberland councillor, will be speaking. We'll be announcing more speakers and participants as we go along, and they're confirmed. I know hopefully Chris, you'll be there as well. We can involve you somehow, one way or the other. Paul, I'm sure you'll be part of it. You hosted the nuclear forum last time and did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
And you may even see Mr. Pink rock up as well. And you maybe have, you can network with Richard and have some words of wisdom with Richard. But please, if you can get your ticket, 29th of September at the Guildford Leagues Club. It's going to be a great event. And just lastly as well, this week I wrote an article in The Spectator as well, again on this issue. So please head to thespectatoraustralia.com, read the article, learn more about these offshore wind farms, because it is a massive issue. But that was a lot to get through, but we're going to get through a lot tonight. So I can shut up now. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening going, well, that's Stephen Tripp, doesn't he? He's got 3 people sitting there like stunned mullets, doesn't he? Shut up.
You are doing so much. We really appreciate it. You're always for the cause. Thank you.
I'm going to palm it off to you now, Paul.
All right. Well, today's episode, Agent Provocateurs and Manufacturing Consent. Would the government create a crisis in order to create a result that forwards one of the agendas that they have that they don't want to discuss publicly? So first, we could start off with the definition of an agent provocateur. I was going to try to find an image for that, but then when you try to find images for agent provocateur, you get a Foreigner album from the 1980s and a lingerie brand. So I just had to stick with, that
was a good album, by the way.
It was a good album. Absolutely. The lingerie is not bad either, but it was not really, so I went with the definition to start, what an agent provocateur is. Steve, you want to just give him the definition? Is that all right?
This one down the bottom. One employed to associate with suspected persons and by pretending sympathy with their aims to incite them to some incriminating action.
Yep. So agent provocateurs create a crisis to help create a crisis, and then you have what they call problem, reaction, solution. Once the agent provocateur creates the crisis, helps create the crisis, then the government comes with its proposed solution. So, and that gets into Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent. Basically, he points out that the government often works with the media to manufacture consent for a particular outcome. So Noam Chomsky is a lion of the political left. And his video, or his book and then video, Manufacturing Consent, is a couple of let's see if do you have that video queued up, but I can talk about it until you find that. So yeah, Noam Chomsky, absolute hero of the political left, socialist, was supposed to be a free speech advocate and anti-war advocate until recent days. But anyway, let's start with his view of manufacturing consent.
Chomsky. Do you ever watch the news and ask yourself what the motivations are for a station sharing a particular story? Information should be informative, entertaining, and amusing, but is it always this way? The mass media has a dark side to it that you may not have thought of before. In addition to entertaining us, these sources also promote certain social norms and behaviors. The government and other people who control the country are more in charge of what you see on the television than you might think. These are the claims of Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent, the political economy of the mass media. Chomsky argues that with an unequal division of wealth and power comes a wildly uneven distribution of stories that favors the upper class. Even though the media boasts objective, trustworthy reports, they are only a puppet of those who are really in charge. Here are 3 of the most fascinating lessons from this book.
So, yes, is the government involved in the media? We absolutely know that they are. The Twitter files.
Chris would be someone good to ask.
Yeah.
Because you're involved heavily in the independent media and you've always got some fantastic analysis. Actually, you were on Vicky Campion's show the other day. I was going to send you a text saying I really enjoyed your analysis. So if anyone can look up the Vicky Campion show and on TNT Radio, check that interview out with Chris, because
To this though, why is this even a question? Who just believes this? How can anyone at home be wondering and being like, oh, is the government involved in me? Of course it is.
It seems obvious to you, but the number of people who just turn on ABC, read the Sydney Morning Herald, watch CNN, and actually believe, what they see is
the question becomes how involved then? Is this that Albanese is sitting there writing the masthead of what's going to be on the Sydney Morning Herald? No, he's not. The question is how involved, how heavy are the fingers on the scale of what gets covered and what isn't. And I think that's more the question, because to crises, the rule in media, both in terms of when people ask me and running stories, never let a good crisis go to waste.
Yep.
This is not some conspiracy theory or idea of it. I tell people not to let crises go to waste all the time. You must follow the hype cycle. You must follow the news cycle, or you are irrelevant. And being irrelevant is pretty much the worst thing possible in politics.
And knowing that, like you said earlier, if it bleeds, it leads. The question is it ever happened in history, and might it happen again, that the government creates the bleeding that then the media cannot look away from?
But Paul, you're still talking about opportunism versus premeditation.
Oh, absolutely.
And planning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't have any confidence in this government's ability to even plan the next trip to the toilet.
Right. Do you think that this government? Do you think this government pulls this government's strings? Do you think that the Australian government is the leader of the Five Eyes, or merely a junior player? Are there smarter people who have pulled those strings in the past?
I mean, there's an absence of IQ in the Australian government right across the board.
I don't know any of them personally, but I do know that, it is clear that, some of these things all the way back from 100 years ago, and this is one of the ones that we'll cover later, the sinking of the Lusitania. It's, to get the United States into World War I was not just some random, it bleeds, it leads. This ship was put knowingly into shipping lanes that was well patrolled, with a consignment of weapons on it, so that when it got hit by the first torpedo, it exploded. And there was a conversation between when this plan was discussed, that if something like that happened, the winds of war would blow the Americans into the war, and that's exactly what happened. So this was planned, a planned crisis, and then the media did not look away.
I actually disagree with you about the detail about that.
You want me to read you the quote?
I don't care about the quote. It's like the whole idea of it was to stop Germany's U-boat offensive by having an atrocity. And that it was very effective, because Germany was given an ultimatum by the United States to stop sinking merchant ships.
Right.
And they did until 1917. When they started again.
So in 1915, there was a meeting between Lord Grey and Woodrow Wilson's controller, Edward Mandelhouse, on the meeting to George V. If an ocean liner carrying U.S. citizens was sunk, the waves, the flame of indignation would spread across America, in which it would probably carry it into war.
Perfectly right, and it did.
Yeah. So the question is, does the government sometimes set up these things? And we do have Freedom of Information Act requests on
I think it was just a happy accident for the government.
Let me give a more direct example that I can speak to directly.
Okay.
I got leaked voicemails from the mayor of Ryde, who was running for his fourth time to be the next federal member and current member for Bennelong, of him instructing his councillors to use essentially the stationary communications budget to mail out Labor Party information. And it's sexy when you have a voice memo that gets leaked that goes.
Are we allowed to play this?
It's already been played.
Okay, cool.
It's already out there.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. One thing that I was reminded of at the local government training day was our councillor communications allowance. This is $300 a month. I would say it is now compulsory for Labor councillors to use that allowance to write direct mail to residents, essentially a free direct mail outlet. It's good for us as individual councillors. It's also good for us as Labor councillors.
Now, this was great stuff that I got to break, and the rest of the media picked up on, and disappeared the very next morning.
So why is that not fraud?
What happens the next? Why isn't it fraud? because the story disappears under the rug when a bigger story gets dropped the next morning. When Scott Morrison was being asked about the local Liberal candidate, Simon Kennedy's anti-vax views. Anti-vax, oh, it's got chemicals in them. Why is that not fraud? Because a bigger story came along. It's called the Golden Tap, where you've got the Labor Party Communications Office saying, we've got a problem here. What have we got on the shelf that we can use to make this go away? And I speak to you over there at Channel 9, who we're in close contact with over at the Labor Party HQ. They're in close contact and goes, mate, we need this story to go away. All right? Here's this. Make it go away. And he heads down to Simon Kennedy's campaign headquarters by about 11 a.m., I think it was. And he's banging on the door saying, what's all this then? And this story disappears. It's not fraud because it was attention.
That would be very frustrating, I would imagine, for you.
I wish this would have gone further, but it was great to see the world as it is, not the way I wish it was. This is how it works. You pile up this dirt and you don't run it unless you need it, because they could have put it out there. No, it was 10 times more effective to make a story against you disappear. This is the chess game.
So what you're essentially talking about is false flag events.
Yep.
So you've got a list of them.
Yeah, there was a Substack that, and kind of doing a bit of research, it was actually a really wonderfully done Substack. And is it being shared? There is the link.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the, it lists a number of events from the Reichstag fire. Operation Northwoods was a fascinating one, and we do have Declassified Freedom of Information Act request to show exactly, how this was planned, and it led to the firing of Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Admiral Lionel Lemnitzer.
So basically, if people don't know, Operation Northwoods was a proposed plan by the U.S. Department of Defense to stage acts of terrorism on U.S. soil and blame it on Cuba to justify military intervention.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it didn't go forward because Kennedy and McNamara thought it was nuts. But, first they wanted to get Kennedy into the war by dragging him in with the Bay of Pigs invasion. They started the Bay of Pigs invasion. They said, oh, this is, you have to back us up. You have to back us up.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talks about this a little bit, doesn't he?
I don't know that much about what he said, but I know a little bit more about all the different ways. There were 3 events that they tried to get America into the war with Cuba. One was the Bay of Pigs. One was proposing Operation Northwoods, which was going to actually kill U.S. citizens.
What were the details of Northwoods? The jetliners.
Yes.
Go on.
Oh, actually, I would love you to. Cause it's not off the top of my head, but if you know that one, I mean, I know that they were going to put people. They were going to. I think it was like they'd take people off a plane, load it up with, and then have it shot down over. How did this go? Do you know the story?
Try another one. So because they couldn't have it take off unmanned, they'd bail out the back. But the plan was for remote control drones, which had been used for decades before that, right? So you'd set your airliner up so that you could remotely control it. Not documented all of this is, and then it would fly into an office building in a large downtown metro building.
That was the plan?
That was the plan. That was declassified long before the year 2000 or 2001.
I think it was, because I was looking this up a bit. I didn't have a chance to read it thoroughly. I kind of scanned what the plan was, and I was just, I know reasonable amount of American history. I didn't know that one.
Not that long before that, Cuban terrorists had been involved in. Puerto Rican terrorists had got into Congress and shot 8-9 different members of Congress. Shot them, and the headline called a strange day in Congress. So when we look at the headlines of chaos at Trump rally, gunman killed at Trump rally, and we see them, we go,
Trump falls mysteriously.
Very odd. Glass shattering.
Yes.
These headlines aren't new. To see congressmen shot by Puerto Rican and independent activists inside Congress, AK-47s, blood everywhere, photos, and the headline is strange days in Congress. This is not new.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, we should know at this point that media is a tool of some shadowy set of organizations behind the government or among the government, and that we should see any of these things with skepticism, but people tune in every day and take things on face value, and it's actually quite dangerous to us, because we have been dragged into crisis and war regularly over the last 100 years on things that the public would not consent to if they were aware how it happened.
Battleship Maine in the harbor of Havana.
Yep, I think that's in there as well. And that right.
I want to bring one up and bring Richard in because he was telling me about this one through the week. Now, this is Britannia. This is the Marco Polo Bridge Incident. And according to Britannia.com, it says, on the night of July 7th, 1937, a small Japanese force on maneuvers near the Marco Polo Bridge demanded entry to the tiny walled town of Wanping in order to search for one of their soldiers. The Chinese garrison in the town refused the Japanese entry. A shot was heard, and the two sides began firing. The Chinese government, under strong anti-Japanese pressure, refused to make any concessions in the negotiation of the dispute. The Japanese also maintained their position. As a result, the conflict continued to grow, and it led to the Sino-Japanese War. Mm-hmm. Richard, do you have any comments?
Absolute poppycock. Complete rubbish. Absolutely untrue. In actual fact, there was a Japanese garrison that was there since the Boxer Rebellion in about 1901, I think it was. And the Japanese had garrisons all over China, and a lot of European countries did as well, because they had to protect their own sort of trade and citizens and stuff like that. So anyway, Mao Zedong was concerned that the Kuomintang was beating him in the Chinese Civil War. So he decided it would be much better if the Kuomintang was fighting the Japanese. So he got a few of his troops to dress up in Kuomintang uniforms, and they attacked this Japanese outpost. And they had a few dead bodies to leave behind in Kuomintang uniforms, and that spoiled the Japanese ceasefire with the Kuomintang. And that's all documented in John Toland's book, which is called The Rising Sun, which I memorized when I was about 13. And I had a huge fight with my history teacher about the origins of World War II.
So essentially, you're making the argument that the Chinese were...
This whole narrative from Britannia is a Sinophile CCP propaganda piece. It's bullshit.
How come you believe that, but you don't believe that the Polish were killing Germans to provoke Germany into World War II?
Oh, yeah. 30 million Poles attacked 90 million Germans. Yeah, such a convincing narrative, that one.
Well, what about how many people China has compared to Japan?
Well, people aren't everything. Leadership in organization.
But do you see
over raw numbers every day of the week?
I'm raising this because I'm going to make the point, a little bit contradictory to what we're all saying, is people believe what they want to believe.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know about any of this? Obviously, in war or conflicts, there's two sides, or possibly even more sides of the story. Which ones are definitely true, or are we looking for conspiracies that aren't there?
The best thing is to keep an open mind and hold both views.
Yeah.
Why not?
On the whole, but then we also sometimes have Freedom of Information Act requests, documents, declassified documents that the people in power denied for years or decades.
Okay, so like the Gulf of Tonkin has been declassified.
Right.
Classified.
Those the Northwoods declassification doesn't make Admiral Lemnitzer look good at all. Or the U.S. government, or the military at the time. So I think one way is if it's embarrassing and buried and then comes out, I think that's probably some of your more trustworthy documents.
My view is to cut through it all. Who shares your similar goals, interests, backgrounds, history, all of it, to understand what truth is can be often irrelevant to what future you can look for. History is kind of a vague, complex. Who's really seeing that? But Mao Zedong, or half of China, viewed the Kuomintang as more of an enemy than the Japanese.
Absolutely.
And let me tell you, for every Chinaman living in China at that time, nothing about the Japanese had a more shared interest than Sun Yat-sen or Mao Zedong. The Japanese had far less shared interest, background, history than any of it. You were stuck kind of between a three-way between three of them, but the Japanese were not going to treat them any better than Mao or Sun Yat-sen. So we can look at, in that same situation, people from afar, who shares what you want, who has your best interest in mind, and the truth, we'll get to that. But first, begin with common background, common interest, in that open mind in an age of the internet. I'm not so sure. I'm not an open mind advocate. I'm actually saying we've got way too much information, and so that it's what led to where we are today.
Yeah, I think that's all very astute, Chris. What I would say is that the Chinese have a vested interest in portraying the Japanese as aggressors and colonialists and stuff like that, and themselves as the righteous victims, and that's not actually the case. The Japanese were very keen to stay out of China, and Napoleon himself said, "Let China sleep, because when she wakens, the whole world will tremble." And every major power was very aware that going into China would be like, committing slow suicide by drowning.
Well, we threw the boxer, 11-nation alliance. The first time that the Australians got to serve under an Australian flag, we went in and decided that we needed to police certain European quarters of their cities that had been carved up, our own independent security forces. From my view, the Boxer Rebellion is actually a great rhyme of what our future multiculturalism will look like in the West, where we will have different ethnic, religious quarters policed on their own, as we've seen in the UK.
Very possible.
I've put
I've
put the link in the chat if anyone wants to call in and maybe express your views. If you know any historical content that you want to add to this, we will be moving more closer and closer to modern day events. And I guess one of the ones that was in our lifetime was the 9/11 attack. I'm going to ask you each the same question. I'm going to get your response. I'll start with you, Richard. Do you believe the government narrative of 9/11?
Pretty much.
Chris?
A lot of untold questions. A lot of questions.
And Paul?
Yeah, my relationship with that is actually quite complicated. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure who. My father worked in the building. He was about 24 floors below where the first plane hit, and so I spent a couple hours that morning thinking my father had died, trying to figure out which building, because I couldn't remember which building he worked in at the time and that kind of thing. He got about 3 blocks away before the first tower fell. Came home in that covered in that white dust that a lot of people did. And kind of also another strange thing, I had left NASA a year or two before that, and at the time I was teaching political sociology to convicts. So I went into my class after that event, and there were a number of people who were converts to Islam, who had some views. So, I kept on hearing different conspiracy theories at the time that, one was, all the Jews got a notice not to come in to work that day. I was like, my dad worked with Jewish people who came to work that day. And they're like, and then they kind of go on to the next one. I'd also heard conspiracy theories about, the melting point of steel is much higher than kerosene. I was like, yeah, but if you looked at the strength of steel at that temperature. So, I had sort of debunked a number of these conspiracy theories. And it's one of the things that make me question when people have hypotheses that are easily disproved. But over time, there was another thing. I've changed my mind over the last 4 years. There's a funny slide, if you're willing to pull up the awakening journey. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek version of basically how cynical, how believing people are of certain things. So this was something that was sent to me that I thought was pretty funny. I basically, everyone, wherever they are on this scale, they think everyone to the left of them is naive, and everyone to the right of whatever their position is nuts.
Can you, I heard you talk about this morning, and you said, was it you or someone else that was saying you never see a baby pigeon? Because I'm looking at
this is the birds isn't real.
Birds aren't real.
Yeah, if you look,
I'm like, I know I haven't seen a baby pigeon.
so this, all the different obscure ideas of what people believe and whether they don't believe, whether they believe in the global boiling hypothesis, or chemtrails or 5G or censorship. The birds aren't real is kind of a funny one. You can find it on the internet, and they say basically all birds are kind of like spy drones by the government. And they say, hey, have you ever seen a baby pigeon? No, you haven't, because they're all kind of these.
Why is that? What do they?
They're just in the nests until. But it's kind of funny. That's one of the things they point to kind of.
I've never seen a baby seagull either.
Yeah, well, nests. But that's the thing is that sometimes when you get more and more cynical about how many things you've been lied to, eventually you kind of go a little bit perhaps off the deep end and start to question.
So what made you question 9/11?
Okay, so there are a couple of things. One is I debunked all those those hypotheses that were clearly debunkable, and then one of the things that my thinking rested on is the government would never do something like that to us. And then 2020 rolls around, and early treatment for a disease, if it was off patent, was criminalized and tested at the wrong time and the wrong dose, throwing hundreds of thousands or millions of people under the bus in order to maintain some other solutions. And so one of the pillars of why this could never happen was taken out. And then, speaking to someone that we've spoken to before, there was someone we knew who was offered the opportunity to do the Pentagon plane run. And the pilots who offered this person the chance to run the simulation said, we've all tried to do what the government said that the plane would do, and none of us can do it.
I think, as Chris said, there's so many untold or unanswered questions about 9/11. For people talk about the controlled demolition, or what appears to be a controlled demolition of the towers, Building 7 falling. But for me, it was always the Pentagon was a big question around that. And a lot of that went back to before 9/11 happened. I remember watching a documentary that was talking about the defense shield that they had around the Pentagon and the layers of missile defense that they had, so nothing could ever get through. And then you hear about this plane hitting, and I'm thinking at the time I was in year 11, so I don't know how old I was, 17 or something, thinking, well, why didn't they shoot it down? Did they just let it hit? So that was my thoughts at the time. Now I believe the narrative. I mean, I'm a young high school student. What else am I?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know any other thing to do than to just believe what I'm told at the time. Fast forward, I started watching this show, Jesse Ventura's Conspiracy Theory, more so because I was a huge wrestling fan and I liked Jesse Ventura. After probably about 4 or 5 episodes, I started realizing, hey, all these conspiracies that he's talking about are all fitting together. They're all got the very similar narrative behind them, a very similar undercurrent. What I might do is I might play a clip from Jesse Ventura's Conspiracy Theory talking about the Pentagon attack, or what happened with the Pentagon.
Every inch outside the Pentagon is covered by security cameras. An FBI report indicated at least 85 cameras were up and working that morning.
Yeah, there were a lot of cameras around the Pentagon. If you look at the Pentagon, you can see that there's cameras on each corner. There's cameras at some of the businesses around the Pentagon. And we know in those cases, the tapes were confiscated immediately by the FBI within hours of the event.
It took 5 years of lawsuits to force the Defense Department to release just 3 minutes of footage. And it all came down to 5 frames. Notice.
So that's the footage. That's all that's been released. Richard, have you ever seen a plane hit the Pentagon?
No.
Did you ever question that?
No.
So
I'm not that interested in American.
This is one of those.
This is a massive.
I'm not.
Led to 2 wars.
You just gobbled the narrative up and didn't think about it again.
I wasn't curious about it.
This is a classic: the dog that didn't bark. issue. That it's not the evidence that something else happened, but the lack of evidence of what they're trying to say. Like, there's absolutely no reason why there wouldn't be plenty of video evidence showing the plane, but none of it exists.
Yeah. Why is that?
Well, I think we have, the better hypothesis is it wasn't a plane. The pilots who have tried to do that run can't do it. And the frames of film that would have shown the plane don't show it. And the other thing is that there was also, I've seen a video clip of one of the first reporters to arrive on the scene who talks about how he doesn't see any engines. He doesn't see anything. And a lot of these things, kind of like Chris was saying earlier, they get scrubbed from the internet. They get, waved away.
Well, that is, I mean, we've all seen footage of airlines crashing. We didn't see any footage of wreckage around the Pentagon or anything like that.
Especially at first. Later, they had, a bunch of like airline seats kind of, lined up, and they took some pictures of that. But the first reporter to arrive on the scene talks about how he doesn't see any typical airplane wreckage.
Chris, do you have any?
My view is,
thoughts?
Let's say that we have video released of Rumsfeld admitting with Bush and
Cheney?
Cheney, all in the room with Condoleezza, all scheming and planning, and it's beyond any doubtable proof. We don't need to dive into 9/11 to show that there is no consequence, because remember why the Iraq War was begun?
Weapons of mass destruction.
Which they found plenty of.
Oh yeah, there was lots of evidence. No, there wasn't.
And even after it wasn't found, well, it was before the re-election. That re-election still came through with a resounding success.
Yeah. He was re-elected.
It doesn't really matter. It doesn't move polls that much. Maybe a few points later on down the way, but nothing compared to control of media, nothing compared to being able to control jobs, people that you can hire and put in your NGOs, nothing compared to commercial interests, nothing compared to advertising, all of these different verticals. You could literally invade another country, kill 2 million, shall we say, casualties. I don't know, there's a number for Iraq, and get re-elected, get away with 2 million murders, and there's no consequence unless you're able to organize your opposition to this and repeat the line time after time after time. It won't be easy under Albanese. We know that more than we do weapons of mass destruction.
Well, it also hides other things. I'll before we move on, I'll quickly play this because I think this is it kind of wraps up why the Pentagon was involved in the 9/11 attacks, at least according to some conspiracy theories out there.
One thing that troubled me greatly was the fact that the day before 9/11, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld has a press conference where he reports that they have simply lost $2.3 trillion. They don't have receipts for it. They don't know where it went. Do you recall that, the day before 9/11? Well, if you don't, that's what happened.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
And how ironic that the exact place that was struck in the Pentagon was where all those records were supposedly had to be.
Golden tap.
Yeah. Motive.
We definitely didn't hear about that at the time.
No.
Nope.
And Building 7 also had a number of things that were conveniently lost. There was the story of Martin Armstrong talks about what was in that building, as well as a number of accounting records and some insurance issues.
And something about the insurance issues with the actual towers themselves, the Twin Towers. There's some shenanigans there. Chris, big events like this take the focus away from, I've given an example there. Rumsfeld comes out and says there's $2.3 trillion we can't account for. The next day, 9/11 happens, and no one talks about it at the time. It doesn't resurface for years after. And as you said, these people are out of office by that point. There's no accountability. How significant? You once told me that the world is a stage, and a lot of this stuff. How much of what we see in the media is part of that stage?
Essential. Non-staged managed content is really hard to edit. If you know what's going to happen before it does, it makes your life so much easier. Why are you laughing? It's true.
I believe it.
When I go to a protest and I know the order of what's going to happen and who's going to speak and who, what the narratives are, when I get home, I'm like, this is so easy. You just get to cut it up. You know the pieces. You got the transcript. It's just so easy.
So you can have the cameras set up where you want them.
Well, the other thing that actually reminds me, on the Trump assassination, they had a New York Times reporter with an 8,000 frame per second camera ready to go.
A9 III, it was 1/8,000th of a second was the frame, and he's using one of the new global shutters. But the iconic photo that was not a global shutter camera. I know way too much about this.
Yeah, please. No,
there's a great podcast with the photog that did it. Yes, and it was that new camera is the only way that zip shot you would have been able to see could have happened. It's amazing how much focus we've now actually got on the people who take these photos. Beforehand, it was just throwaway, whatever. Now Evan, he's a hero who got it.
Well, this is a big example. Though I don't want to cut you off, but when you say a lot of attention's on the photographer, the Zapruder film with the JFK assassination that didn't come out until years later.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it didn't come out straight away. It came out years later. Now, in modern times with social media, people can take footage of these events and it pops up straight away.
With this one, everyone saw it. But with Zapruder, you would, if I were recording that camera, I would think twice before I would release it and who to and how I handle that.
Kind of like the Hunter Biden laptop. You release it to the wrong person and it disappears for a year before...
or you disappear.
Well, that too.
Well, Alex Jones, and I've listened to him from time to time, always says that if you've got something, release it, because if you release it and then you get knocked off, it's obviously suspicious. But if you don't release it, they still know you've got it, and then you get knocked off. No one's going to blink an eye.
That's just where you need to think about who knows what you've got, and you've just got to take your time before you do anything like that, because. Yeah, things.
Or
things
you can
happen.
release it under someone else's name.
You could do that.
You've just got to think twice, because Zapruder had something in his hands that was, that was real live fire. That I would have thought twice before releasing that.
And that was one of the things I've changed my mind about as well. The JFK. I mean, I thought it was strange at the time.
You might have gone there as well. Have you been there to the actual?
Yeah, I have to the Dallas that area. And
you stand there in that building. I know you can't look out of the exact same window, but it's the next room, and you just go, no way.
Yeah. So the I did watch Oliver Stone's movie JFK. I think that was the name of it. And yes, it seemed really suspicious. But then the book The Devil's Chessboard, and RFK Jr. talking about also the assassination of his father, RFK Sr. The interview about that made it crystal clear that Sirhan did not kill his father, and that it was a deep state operation.
We're talking about all these historical events to get to the point of where we are right now and what could come next, because I think it is important, Paul, we've had this conversation to highlight potentially what could come next to try and ensure that it doesn't happen. Almost like if you expose it, then it might not happen as much. Richard, we're talking about all these supposed orchestrated events. Do you think Albo's capable of orchestrating?
No. You're talking about Albo writing stuff. It's like he has enough trouble reading stuff. I mean, the guy is completely incompetent.
But who actually thinks that the prime minister is in charge? Who actually thinks that Biden was the person who is organizing the U.S. government?
Well, I grew up under John Howard, I believe.
That's a very potent argument, Paul, because you think, God, these guys couldn't organize anything.
Biden couldn't organize his breakfast, or walking upstairs. Yeah. But clearly the U.S. government was functioning with some puppeteer in charge,
in some relative sense, yes.
Well, I mean, or at least pulling the strings and getting Twitter to deplatform and Meta to deplatform event, media that they didn't approve of. Yeah, well, all that's documented, and Biden didn't actually run it.
That's all in very drastic sort of contrast to Australia, which doesn't appear to have any leadership at all.
Well, the leadership doesn't have to be domestic. Who says the leadership is domestic? MI6 could run Australia. Whatever organization
with our government, anything's possible. Anything. I mean, I've never seen such a collection of idiots.
Well, useful idiots, perhaps.
Not even useful.
Well, they're useful to someone.
Well,
someone made certain things happen in 2020 and 2021 that should never have happened.
Richard would never give Albo any sort of encouragement or praise, and rightfully so. I think you love having a go at Albo.
Well,
actually, quickly,
do you ever feel like you're punching down?
No.
Yeah.
We had a just quickly, we love doing top fives and everything like that. The other night we were discussing our top 5 worst Australian prime ministers, and interestingly, you had, I think, 3 out of the 5 were very recent prime ministers of this country.
Yeah, Albanese, Turnbull, and Rudd. They're 3 of the top bottom 5.
Isn't that pretty scary?
Well, it is. I mean, we haven't had anyone that's got much of an idea since Howard left.
To answer your question, I mean, when Howard was the prime minister, yes, I did feel like he was in control. I felt like he was running the country.
Yeah, and I mean, clearly the person running
now, I feel like the bureaucracy is running the country.
Yeah, and in the U.S., Biden clearly doesn't run anything, hasn't run anything for a long time. And when my sense of things, as much as I don't like his style, is that when Trump was in office, there was a clear plan to destabilize his administration by every deep state entity coming out of the woodwork. 3 impeachments, all kinds of media hoaxes, blaming him for things he didn't do.
There's a comment here. Dilmaz on Rumble says, how about the CIA getting rid of Gough Whitlam?
No. I was alive at that time. Let me assure you it didn't happen.
How can you be sure? How could you possibly be sure?
I'm positive.
Well, that seems incredible.
Whitlam got rid of himself. I mean, you've never seen
I'm not saying
so
I disagree.
pompous or grandiose as Gough Whitlam.
Yeah,
I mean, he might have been a towering intellect. I'll give him that. But I mean, he got himself into that situation 100%. He tried to govern unconstitutionally when he was denied supply, and he forced the Governor General, who was one of his best mates, to fire him. So how could the CIA have possibly orchestrated that?
Because they would have pushed someone like Khemlani straight into the hands of someone like that. I mean, the minister at the time, the finance minister at the time, who was managing that, who would have just said, "Oh, you're looking for something like this," who just would have been aware of that and managed to get.
Khemlani had nothing to do with the dismissal. Nothing at all. It's completely separate.
The dismissal was driven by media, and Khemlani had everything to just create the perfect storm, the absolute perfect storm in the media.
No, I don't agree. I don't agree with that at all. I mean, it wasn't driven by the media. It was a constitutional crisis that Whitlam created, all on his own, against all advice. And he did get advice from legal minds like Sir Garfield Barwick and so on and so forth.
Dilmaz, I hope I'm saying that name right, is saying when he tried to get rid of Pine Gap.
Did he?
Which is an American
I
base.
don't remember that at all. I was alive. I was reading the newspaper every day, often 2 or 3. I don't remember that.
Okay.
I mean, Pine Gap is sort of like one of those dirty little secrets. It's like it's not talked about, it's not known, it's not looked into. There's no curiosity about it. It's just there. But I mean, it's basically there because it's to our benefit for it to be there.
I don't know anything about this particular event, but what I'd be shocked to believe anyone could possibly be sure, that there wasn't another play. Like, for instance, Nixon, I've just learned fairly recently about how the Watergate scandal was not remotely organic. That the G. Gordon Liddy was not was not related to what Nixon asked to do at all. And that, it's there's a lot has come out about the Nixon basically removal that puts a very different historical context on that than
listening to Nixon say, if the CIA was aware of all of this, why weren't they informing me along the way? In the interviews with Frost, it's a really good question. If the CIA knew this was happening, and was actively informing all manner of government agencies, including his opposition, including the Democrat Party. Why wasn't the CIA director who he was meeting with, once every week or so? Nixon asked the question, why didn't I know? Why did it seem everyone on Capitol Hill know except me?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm in.
Chris, I think one of the biggest advantages we have now, and we just touched on this, is the fact that we have social media and the internet now. And if something happens and people were at an event like the Trump assassination and they can get this footage out straight away, it has a big impact on the overall narrative because you can see it. You can go on X and you can see all this footage straight away. When I heard about it, I went to the news sites first, didn't see a thing. My next step was to go to X, and there's all the footage that I could possibly want.
Yeah.
Straight away, bang, it's right there. Now, what we're seeing in the UK is there's been a clampdown on social media. Now, I did these two guys that have been arrested for their posts. I mean, they're putting out some stupid comments. So they're trying to incite violence, etc., etc. You may dispute that. I'm not sure, but
sure, call it inciting violence.
Well, I think they're saying, go.
They were sentenced inside 48 hours.
That's crazy, isn't it?
48 hours. How do you mount a defense in 48 hours to that?
You don't.
And for differential enforcement, there were people who were actively committed rapes and things along those lines that got suspended sentences or things like the differential in enforcement. From what I've seen, is unbelievable.
So you put out a lot of content, Chris. Are you concerned because what's happening in the UK surely will come here in some way or form? We've got the e-safety commissioner and Albo in the basically top positions at the moment.
We've got about 2.5 years. We've got about 2.5 years of doing whatever it is that we're doing right here. Licenses for public broadcast in the same way that Channel 9 has to apply for its license for public broadcast, we'll have here. I'll need to apply for a public broadcasting license. Once you're, I don't know what, an arbitrary number, a free speech license. Once you have 1,000 followers, more than 5,000 people have viewed you, you're going to pop up on Facebook. Hey, just want to let you know. You know how you get demonetized? You'll have the same thing. You have to apply to continue to reach a broad audience.
When COVID happened and mandates started coming in and lockdowns, I remember thinking to myself, and this was a big reason why I pushed back against it all, is this the country we want to live in? Is this the Australia that we envision? And it goes to this point as well. If we're going to bring in this level of censorship where you have to apply for a permit to be an independent journalist or just put footage on social media, is that really the country we want to live in?
No, but you don't get a say in that.
Why not?
Because you don't have a sufficiently wide enough corporate sponsored audience. You haven't been able to stack your branch of a political party to swing the 8 million people of New South Wales so you get 2 senators. Alex Antic's trying to do that. He's getting somewhere there because you don't have power. Do you run universities? No? Oh, okay. Sorry, mate. Jog on. That's how it is. Do you run universities? Do you run a corporation? Do you have large, significant amounts of enormous wealth being able to leverage an interest that you have in mind? A George Soros backer, for example? No, you don't get that. This is how democracy has been for a long time. After all, Napoleon shut down plenty of newspapers. What is it? What did he say about a journalist?
No, I don't know that one.
He dips his pen into the gutter to write his fountain pen into the gutter to write his utter trash on toilet paper. Wonderful way of words.
Yeah.
They had a good turn of phrase back then.
Kevin Lockray is in the chat. Welcome, Kevin. I hope you're doing well, mate. Kerr had no choice but to order a double dissolution as required by the Constitution because Whitlam did not have the confidence of Parliament, i.e. he couldn't obtain supply. Now, yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. Exactly true.
That can be true. And a certain someone who feels that Whitlam is moving too close to China can also decide.
Or is what Kevin just said the narrative that's out there and people will just believe it because they want to believe it?
I just don't think it was that complicated. I think Whitlam's ego was completely out of control and he got himself into a situation which he just thought that he could transcend because he was so great.
Now, Paul, I'm going to put this to you. So
I look at the jockeys, not the horses.
Well, this is good. This disinformation legislation is looming over us, right? And the narrative is that we need to shut down misinformation. We need to shut down disinformation because it can lead to violence and it's dangerous. And people on the other side are saying, no, we're intelligent enough to be able to discern what's right and wrong, what's true and what's not. But essentially, we're sitting here, four of us all have slightly different opinions about historical events. Do you think it's important for the government to crack down on what's true and what's not and determine what's true and what's not?
No, it just shows we can think for ourselves. That's all.
Well, the most important form of misinformation is government misinformation. You know, they can happily provide strong counter narratives to anything we get wrong. But on the other hand, if the government is the one who's creating the misinformation, and there's plenty of historical background for that, and they kind of have their hooks into the media, what's left to actually inform the public of government malfeasance? That's the biggest danger.
Chris, how much confidence do you have in individuals to have discernment of what's right and what's wrong?
Do you trust ACON and other transgender lobbying agencies to distribute their misinformation to your children? That's free speech, isn't it? To distribute the leaflets at the school and distribute them? Isn't that freedom of their speech for their organization to use?
But are they sexualizing children?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, everything you don't like, freedom of speech, right?
Well, no. I mean, when it comes to children, there are different standards.
Okay, go on.
Well,
go on.
You know, there's a reason why certain why we protect children from adult content.
So I can't print information or put information out there that could be viewed to reach under 18 audience. Okay. Right?
Yeah. I mean,
it's an under 18s.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I agree.
Oh, but plenty of this could reach under 18s.
Could.
Well,
see,
I mean,
what you're saying, like the example that I just brought up about the two guys in the UK that got thrown in jail for and inciting violence. If you're going to put on social media, let's go down the road and bash the people down there. Well, maybe there's a case for your freedom of speech being taken away from you.
We don't want them here. Fire emoji.
Well, but this is getting in a very dangerous area, isn't it?
Gesticulating at police officers.
I don't have a problem with that. So.
Bystanders. We can keep going. I think the example of freedom of speech is trying to find freedom of speech you guys don't like. And that's where it comes to kids or anything that could transgender.
No. I'm not saying that. Look, I get your point. Like I don't like the transgender stuff aimed at kids. Like for example, you were there actually. The protest outside Cumberland Council. Steve Christie tried to ban a book that was talking about same-sex parents. Right. I looked at that and I'm like, okay, Steve Christie is making a mistake, and people disagreed with me, but I thought that's the wrong book to target. Because it's not essentially sexualizing children. It's just saying if you have two mums or two dads, then you're just as special as anyone else. I mean,
very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with that. Even though I might feel uncomfortable or whatever my feelings are, that's fine. If you want to put a book out there saying that it's okay to have two mums, it's okay to have two dads, then that's okay. What I have a big disagreement with is books like What is Sex or whatever that book, I can't remember exactly what it has
explicit,
where it actually has instructions on how, that's what I have a problem with.
So we've got
because now you're stepping into something that there's a law there. You can't have underage sex. So if you can't groom children, things like that. Or when it comes to violence, if you're going to go, if I step up now and punch Richard in the head, right? Okay, that's assault, right? If I put that on social media and say, next time I see Richard Storch, I'm going to punch him in the head. Now that might be not like stabbing Richard, but it's still violence, and you would still get charged for that.
What I'm trying to show is the difficulty of freedom of speech to be applied, because inevitably with freedom of speech, it doesn't apply to speech that we like.
Yes,
and what we run into is that there must be some limits to speech, but we can't agree as a society.
Well, we have some
that's a good point.
We have very draconian defamation laws. Yeah. Very, I mean, much more so than say America. So we've already got a built-in
See, but this podcast is a clear example of you need to have discussions like this. You're posing these questions to me and I'm trying to answer it like that. I'm going to go away and I'm going to think about this and I'm going to come up with a much more solid, concrete answer, right? But there's no issue. There shouldn't be any issue of having these discussions on a live forum because there's also an audience at home that are listening and thinking about these questions as well. So when you ask me a question, the audience is also contemplating that question and they're formulating the thoughts in their own mind and possibly, hopefully, coming to a more solid conclusion in their mind as well. If you completely eliminate all of those questions and all of that speech, then people won't grow, they won't come to better conclusions, and they're just going to bottle up a lot of hatred and negative thoughts in their mind and not flesh them out like they should. And that could lead to more conflict or disillusionment or violence, mental illness, whatever it might be.
People just like children, we learn what we're taught. We coming up with an invented idea that we haven't heard from someone else is almost impossible, implausible. We're a collection of all of the different books that we've read and movies that we've seen and people that we've spoken to. You close that down and you get something that's a little bit, well, that's how you shape society. That's how you shape the future. And that's exactly what we're barreling into at the moment. Except they're not going to necessarily use force to do that, just noise. We're just not going to pay attention to it. Between every TikTok reel that has 400,000 views of someone dancing around and throwing things in the air, far more attention is going to be turned into that. And competing in that space requires corporate sponsorship, money, video editing. It's very difficult to try and create something like that with an entertaining host. This, if it can be clipped into TikTok, can work, but everyone under the age of 35 is becoming a wall of noise as what they consume is just so loud and so overbearing that you can't cut through into it. Aldous Huxley, kind of Brave New World style, where it's just so entertaining. How can we have an entertaining, exciting way to try and reach them? Instead, we'll just have Powerpuff Girls teaching them how to be transgender.
But the links between the government and the media, that's, to me, where the biggest danger lies, where you had the Twitter files, where you had explicitly government going to social media and say, we don't like this post, take it off. We don't like this issue, take it off. You know, the media is supposed to hold government to account and to expose power for the benefit of the powerless. But to me, it's an absolute disaster if you have the government anywhere near the, you know, as far as that control of the media narrative and being able to censor
well,
stories.
I'd like to make the point that is the essence of fascism.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's the alliance between big business and government. And it's like everyone knows what fascism sounds like, but they don't really know what it means. Right. They don't recognize it when it's in front of them.
Yep.
Can I just read out a comment from Kevin Lockray? Kevin says, we need the right to We need the right to free speech enshrined in our constitution at all levels of government. It is not negotiable. Offense is taken, not given. The only exception should be incitement to violence.
Yep.
So that's Kevin's thoughts.
Yeah.
Stochastic terrorism is the view that it has been for a few years. You can incite violence without inciting violence. Libs of TikTok is a good example of this, who share videos, almost all, of their own creators' content, but in a ridiculing, denigrating way. That has now been phrased as, you've seen testimony in Congress defining Libs of TikTok as a stochastic terrorist.
Do we have any examples of a social media post, or maybe a collection of social media posts that have led to violence?
Innumerable, heaps. It's not particularly hard to refer to a social media. The Rohingyas in Myanmar, Burma. You end up with thousands dead from that, which was a WhatsApp-related viral content that they'd been killing children and all manner of videos, which had been overblown in a way, but general mob, they didn't like them anyway, the Rohingyas, and the government lent into it. Despite Aung San Suu Kyi being widely lauded as a freedom fighter, she turned into everything she hoped to defeat. to hold on to power. These are the tentacles that come up from the chair once you're in the chair. And once Aung San Suu Kyi was no longer the freedom fighter against the government, once she was in the chair, to hold on to it, to stop the other guy from getting in.
But you can also always blame your violence on some influence. Chris made me do it.
Yeah,
he incited me.
I mean, we're missing the elephant in the room. What about the Middle East? I mean, there's so much propaganda, so much on live media, and away we go. I mean, there's never any shortage of violence in anything to do with the Middle East. So I mean, where do you want to start? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to end up?
Do you start there?
I think my main
where do we like?
my main concern is the government hand on the scale, and also making sure people are aware that the next time some event comes up that is focused on, especially when you are clearly being driven into a certain narrative, that people should be aware. Hey, am I being manipulated?
I think Chris makes some good points.
You mean the Jews?
Everything, mate. Everything you've said. But okay, when it comes to misinformation and disinformation legislation, should there be restrictions placed upon people for their social media posts?
They're coming whether you like it or not.
But that's not the question.
There must be some limit.
I think that's the answer, though, isn't it?
But the problem is...
So the answer is that we want to put our views across because we want to argue against, or we either want to argue against the government's moves or for the government's moves. There may be some validation behind what they're trying to do. Maybe people are overreacting by saying, oh, well, they're bringing in misinformation, disinformation legislation. Well, then they must be bringing in a tyranny. I can't talk tonight. Tyranny. But maybe they're just trying to address maybe some of the points that Chris has raised.
If someone like Steve was on the Social Media Affairs Tribunal and he was a judge there, I would trust him to judge if I was inciting people to violence. He is someone like me with a similar background, with a similar future, with a similar hopes, family, or all types of views and values that you can decide as him as a shared society. I couldn't do that with many other people that we share society with today. I could not trust that. And that's why I'm against these licenses, but there must be some limit, but only regulated with people that we share that same common vision, future, background. That's where we're at. There must be some limit, an enormous broad loudspeaker.
Well, this is scary as well, because if we are going to move to a tribunal that does debate these issues, then you're going to need someone on there that is Muslim. You're going to need someone on there that's transgender. You're going to need someone on there that's LGBTQ or whatever. You're going to need, you can't have any white people on there. You can't, no, that's completely, they're excluded. But you will need this huge tribunal with a representative of at least one of these minorities, an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person.
So what you're talking about is a panoramic representation rather than a percentile representation. In other words, there'll be a token white guy and a token.
Well, essentially, if
a token,
if they were to judge
guy or a token, but there'll be just about everyone of every other description there. So we'll have the full panoramic sort of glory,
like the United Nations.
Yeah.
Or more realistically, where we're heading to is the UK. Communities are policing their own. You've seen the UK standing among the UK police standing amongst the Muslim.
This point earlier. Yeah.
And communities are no, this is actually happening. This isn't a theory. This is happening in the UK, where when they did not police those Muslim riots, the people wandering around, we trusted the communities to police their own. Is what the police commissioners said while standing in that Muslim hall.
That's been happening in America, for 20 years. So, you've got privatized law enforcement.
Same thing's happening in South Africa as well, because the police just don't operate effectively. So people hire their own private security.
Sure. And
they find that they respond faster than the police. So there's communities that are protected through private security and all sorts of different things.
Yeah, well,
it's very libertarian.
Rob Cribb will be very happy with all that.
I'm not sure we'd all enjoy living in a cribbitarian paradise. No. It's I'm not sure we'd all enjoy that.
Cribbitopia.
There's no one I have more arguments with than Rob Cribb.
Paul, this was your idea to discuss this issue tonight. Have we fleshed out as much as you wanted to flesh out? What about what's coming? Obviously, we've talked about the UK and what's happening now, but there is a presidential election coming.
Yeah.
And I felt for a long time that something's going to happen before we get to that election. Then we had the Trump assassination attempt. Biden's now dropped out of the race. We have Kamala up against Trump now instead of Trump-Biden. I still don't necessarily feel that's going to be the final equation once we get to November for some reason.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's something coming? What could it
Yeah,
be?
I definitely do. I mean, we live in a hall of mirrors and curated narratives. And one of my concerns about what's going on in the United States is it seems to me that the deep state has crossed the Rubicon. That basically, you know, the powers, the puppet masters who run the current administration cannot afford to have someone they don't control take office. And now that's not to say that they have all the power in the world. Maybe they can't put their fingers on the scale or control the narrative enough, but I think they will do whatever they can to try. And that's why I want people to be skeptical about false flags, manufacturing consent, and not, you know, and also what you were talking earlier, when they disappear a story, when, you know, like you cannot find news about the Trump assassination attempt in the media at all anymore, even though there are vast questions about one of the most important events in recent American history. They disappeared that story by shining new objects in front of us in order to have that go away. And that cannot happen in a stable republic. If you take away people's ability to or willingness to believe that they have a say in the future of their country. I mean, democracies are stable because people think they have input. And, you know, I think we're coming a bit too close to the idea that people don't think that anymore.
Why is a stable democracy so important for Time Warner's quarterly results?
He loves asking the hard questions, doesn't he?
I don't think it is.
While you think about that, I'm going to read out a quote from Kevin Lockray. Kevin says, "There is no need for censorship in the manner being considered. There already exist laws about giving false information with the aim of causing harm or mischief." And then he quotes the Criminal Code 2002, Section 338, and he gives some he gives the actual code there in the chat. So there are some laws in place that already that prevent this sort of thing that we're talking about.
Not like what the UK is enforcing, and not like what we can look forward to in the next couple of years. So yes, absolutely. What I'm talking about is a broadcast license that will come for anyone to reach over 1,000. And yeah,
we'll see.
We'll see.
I think the answer for most people is just to delete their social media. Stop playing this game.
But I just want to challenge this assumption that a stable democracy is the goal for corporate or many people.
It's not their goal.
No. I think you got to orbit around that. That's like a universal light on the hill.
Well, I'm just saying for the people, peaceful transitions of power. You know, democracies. You know, the U.S. is the world's oldest democracy, and the idea, you know, one of the things that prevent revolutions is that, okay, well, you know, at least I had my say. I went to the polling booth, you know, my voice counted. I got a chance to have some input into who is representing me. If you take away that illusion, you take away one of the pillars of stability in Western society. So that's one of my concerns about this whole.
Quite right.
Again, the goal is to prevent a revolution.
Yes.
No, not everyone has that goal.
Well, no, definitely not everyone has that goal.
And then not everyone has that goal to succeed. I think for many people, the goal was a la January 6th, not to have a quiet protest that doesn't have anything. For many, it was for that protest to occur and to use that as a media leverage. As someone in the Appalachians, a 3%er, will decide that this is a great opportunity with no backing, no money, no other organization for him and just 15 guys in trucks to go and launch their own revolution, becomes another opportunity. Or
there are plenty of people in a destabilized society. Absolutely. I'm just saying that that all these forces at work are, you know, they're either playing with fire or purposefully stoking a fire. You know, there are plenty of entities that have no interest in the stability of the United States.
That purposely is just what I wanted to trying to really plant for the viewers and for yourself, is that there's plenty of people who can make plenty of money, get plenty of power,
Oh,
and more
absolutely.
importantly, crush their enemies.
Yep.
In a revolution that does happen, and saying, "Oh, this is an example. We need to literally nuke North Dakota," and they will be able to justify that a 50 kiloton on a specific area, on a Waco situation, Ruby Ridge.
Interesting times.
There was that footage recently of Albanese at Parliament House saying, "I am the Prime Minister." And we all remember that. Was that something that could potentially be censored off the net so no one could possibly see it? Is that what do you think? That's the danger of heading down this path?
Wasn't that a cheap fake?
Oh, well,
There's
this opens up a whole other can of worms as well.
No, a cheap fake is something that is true but has been portrayed deceptively. Remember when Biden was at NATO and he seemed to be wandering off a little bit?
Well, didn't this happen recently with Joe Rogan, and he's suing MSNBC because he was saying he was having a conversation with Michael Malice about Kamala Harris, and he made some points like, he said, oh, she's going to win, and they spliced it up to make it look like he was in her corner and supporting her. Now he's suing them over that.
There's an example of, is it a deep fake? Is it libel? Is it defamation? Is it a cheap fake? A cheap fake is something that's true, but just we don't like it. we don't like it. And we need to make it disappear. So we'll give it a term.
We've got a caller. I'm going to bring him on. Mr. Kevin Lockray, can you hear us, my friend?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, excellent. I'm trying out a new microphone. Is the sound good?
Yes, it sounds pretty good.
Okay, terrific. Yeah, look, I just wanted to sort of put my two tuppence worth in and say that no censorship is acceptable. And the idea that you revealing the truth are causing people to be uncomfortable, and these people being so uncomfortable then decide in their frustration to riot should not prevent you from telling the truth. And that's where things are going very badly wrong in Britain. What people are saying is indeed the truth, but the establishment doesn't want to hear the truth. And when the truth is finally made to the public are very upset and feel they have been betrayed, and they are being betrayed. There is no doubt of that. And that's the story of Tommy Robinson. If you watch his latest with Ezra Levant, you can see how the government and the legacy media, and I call them the legacy media because they're no longer the mainstream media. Anybody who watches them or listens to them other than to gather an idea of what the propagandists are saying is a fool. The real information is in social media and in wonderful conversations like this. I've really enjoyed it tonight, gentlemen. So thank you very much for your contribution and everything. I think it's fabulous.
I don't know if anyone wants to ask you a question, Kevin, but how do we define what's true?
Does anybody want to ask a question?
I'm going to ask you a question. How do we define what's true?
That gets defined in a court of law, and that's where you bring forward people who support your opinion, or you bring forward a series of data that is produced by independent authorities with whom you have no connection, and even better, that they have no connection with each other. That's what a court of law is supposed to do.
The judges aren't appointed by you. They're appointed by a diverse council of transgender-approved, LGBTQ-specific Sharia law experts who judge your case.
I thought that Jacinda Ardern was the sole source of truth, isn't that how it works?
Look, I don't want to take your platform. I'm really enjoying the show. I just wanted to put in that two tuppence and say, to me, and by the way, I'm running for the Senate in the next federal election, which, by the way, seems to be, it's going to be held in May, according to Albanese, of next year, which gives us about 7 months to prepare. And I've got a team that's ever growing. I have a campaign team, and I am definitely going to be running for the Senate, it would appear. And one of my platforms will be that, firstly, we've got to get rid of Section 51, subsection 26 of the Australian Constitution and replace it with a prohibition, and that we have to enshrine in our Constitution free speech, because the Bill of Rights of 1688, passed in 1689, does not provide us any protection at all, and that's exemplified by what's going on in Britain to this day. Now, if you put it in your constitution, those scumbag politicians can't pass an act in Parliament that goes against it. And when it goes in front of a High Court judge, the High Court judge is only interested in the law. They're not interested in whether you're right or wrong or things like that. They're interested in the law. And if the law says that free speech is sacred, then the politicians can't touch you.
Very well said, Kevin. I always love your contribution. You always seem to be able to articulate a message very concisely. So thanks for coming on, mate. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right. Got some comments from Tony, Richard's favorite. So welcome, Tony. Where was the first one from Tony? She made a good point before. If we delete social media, we are essentially complying with their mandate to suppress the sharing of factual information. Do any of you guys have a comment about that?
Very true.
And she says at the end, if it's censored, it's true.
Seems to be some good correlation there.
That could be something of an overreaction, Tony.
I think there's a very good correlation. They don't bother with ridiculous things. You know, birds aren't real and flat Earth. They don't bother censoring that. They censor the things that are inconvenient to the narrative and often correct.
Do you think it's if all this definitely is happening, is it scary to think about what is true and what's been true throughout history that we just are not aware of?
I'll reframe it for you. It's scary to realize how much you don't know, we don't know, by sort of glimpsing things that we weren't aware of. That's very unsettling.
Actually, we're having.
Why didn't I take the blue pill?
Well,
we're having a discussion at work actually, and one of the guys is from Syria. Syria? I think it's Syria. Maybe I'm getting that wrong, but anyway. He was telling me about the golden age, the golden Arab age, and then Genghis Khan came through and basically sent them back to the Stone Age. And they tell a story of the water in the river turning blue from the ink of all the books that they threw into the river and destroyed, essentially taking all the knowledge of the Arab world at the time and completely wiping it out. Could censorship potentially do that? Take away our knowledge, you know, if we can't get access to information anymore and we can't get a certain point of view.
I'm gonna resist the urge to say something quite racist, but anyway, I would say that it wouldn't have needed a river. I'll just leave it there.
You can't say that. That's horrible. I denounce Richard.
I was going to say,
I think the bucket would have.
I denounce Richard.
A coronal mass ejection could undo our centuries of knowledge. That's in my mind.
You're talking about the electrical grid?
Yes, yeah. The idea that we need to harden our electrical grids to solar storms, otherwise our society is at risk. But anyway, that's a little bit of a diversion. Maybe a welcome one.
Aeronautical engineering thing to say. Well, they talk about the fire of the library at Alexandria. So just imagine the history and the knowledge that we've lost over time.
This is why I was a climate change skeptic from the word go, because I know how much scientists lie about, you know, catastrophic volcanism, cosmic impact, prehistoric civilizations. They lie through their teeth about all that stuff. So why would they tell the truth about anything else?
On a simple of knowledge being lost, you know, the old zippity doodah zippy day comes through a movie called Song of the
I know
tune.
Yeah.
Go ahead and watch it. Pull it up on Netflix. Oh, okay. Buy a DVD of it. Go ahead. You can maybe find some old used. No, it didn't come out on VHS, but there were some.
Are you talking
VHS
about like the Mandela effect?
Song of the South. That was the movie. That was the zippity doodah zippity Tar Baby. All that's gone. All of that's been disappeared from knowledge.
I remember that from my early childhood, the tune. I don't remember anything else about it.
Go ahead. You won't be able to find any more. More and more movies have been
sanitized.
No, you can't even watch it. You cannot watch any part of Song of the South. There were some digitized versions created through it, but you cannot find it on any streaming. You can find it here, but you try and find the whole movie for me.
But that days. Now that's the kind of day when you can't open your mouth.
Is this what you're talking about?
Go ahead and find the song of the South. What's that from?
So you're saying this is based on something else?
This
that
is
you
not
cannot
just a
find?
clip. This is a movie called Song of the South, which you cannot go ahead and watch find the entire movie.
Oh.
Buy it. Netflix, DVD, Blu-ray. It has been decommercialized and is now pieces of clips and on Rumbles and all underground. Delegitimized.
Removed history.
And more.
Huckleberry Finn, kind of.
Look at every film that's been made pre-1960 and what warning do you get when it comes up? Not part of, doesn't represent.
Tony's asking a question. I'm going to direct this at Paul. I don't know why, but let's see what you got. Sure. So how many times in history has the human existence been disappeared?
Oh, that is, so this is the idea of lost civilizations. You know, I like Graham Hancock and his work. He talks about how, that there are probably lost chapters of human civilization. And in one of Plato's stories, he talks to, well, actually his uncle Solon was talking to the priests of Egypt, and they said every now and then people start over like children with no memory of what's come before, that there have been catastrophes that leave remnants that future civilizations try to understand by saying things like the stones of the Egyptian pyramids were carved with copper tools and transported without wheels, which makes no sense.
Nonsense.
So when you were in NASA, how much of the aircraft, the spacecraft that you were trying to retro engineer, how much of it was alien? How much of it was ancient civilization?
Not allowed to talk about that.
Oh, I think there's something there, though. I can see something. He wishes he could say something. I believe a lot of it's ancient human. Honestly, that's my gut feel. But
I agree.
Yeah,
we won't need to delete it because Hancock is described in his first line as Wikipedia, identified as a form of pseudo-archaeology, superficially resemble investigative journalism, but a bias towards preconceived conclusions by ignoring context, cherry-picking, misinterpreting, etc., etc. We don't need to delete Hancock.
My goal in life is to get a Wikipedia page about me.
And the question is the narrative.
Then I would love to play Wikipedia fact or fiction. I wish one of you had. I can't wait for Chriscoveries Wikipedia.
I'm on Cookipedia.
A what?
Cookipedia.
Oh yeah. How'd you go on there?
No, it's just crap.
I haven't looked at it.
If it was funny, I would have loved it more. I really like. If it was really funny, but it's not funny.
Yeah.
There are some of those creators who hate cookers who are actually really funny, who I really like, but poor quality.
Yeah, I think this came up when we talked to Graham Hood. I think he's on there. Yeah. I don't know why you would visit that site anyway. So, Paul, to finish up, what's coming? What are we got to prepare for?
We don't know, but
what could potentially happen? What ideas do we need to put out there so they don't do them?
So,
truck bombs in black churches and to blame it on Trump supporters and
it could be any of those things. Unfortunately, my evil hat is not very I'm just not that.
Well,
creative.
that's why we've got Richard. Here.
But the one thing that I do want to point out is that we need to be skeptical and also realize that there's a good chance people are going to be led into a trap of some kind, and to think about not just what you're being presented right in front of you, but where you're being led and what the second order effects are.
Well, Netanyahu was in the US recently. Maybe he's given them some ideas while he was there.
I'm sure they're always thinking about him in not very pleasant ways. But I mean, the thing is that we are sort of proceeding along this path where we think that we're important and that there's nothing that we know a lot, and there's probably going to be something that'll happen which will put us in our place. It'll make us realize just how small we are.
Tony says, did I miss the US political stuff? Tony, you missed a lot. Like, where were you, honestly? Just a shout out quickly. This is not the only podcast I'm going to be doing tonight. At 10 p.m., We have to make it 10 p.m. because we've got a guest from Canada, Greg Venza. Now, in 1981, he converted his Chevrolet Impala to run on ammonium, and it still runs now. Ammonia is hydrogen mixed with nitrogen. I hope I'm getting that right.
I'm immediately curious as to why
It's going to be
hasn't fallen apart with metal corrosion.
Well, you need to watch tonight at 10 p.m. and we can learn all about it. So if anyone's watching this and they're going, I missed the start, well, don't miss the end on what's coming tonight.
I might try and get my son to come along. He's an engineer.
Okay.
It's actually alien tech.
Alien tech. Oh, here we go. What about Velcro? How'd they come up with Velcro?
Lizard people.
Come on, be serious. Come on, give it. All right, Chris. Any final closing comments? What are you most concerned about? What's coming?
Loss of being able to reach people, a feeling of intense isolation, being able to reach people digitally, while in person. I don't know if you notice people around you were increasingly skeptical, doubtful, peeking through blinds. That global village, as people have seen, to turn into the worst parts of a small village, where they're suspicious and distrustful of you in person and want to know who you are and what your background is before they want to know anything about it. So, yeah, that worries me. I don't see a corrective force coming beyond that, and just increasingly accepting of it.
So if all this does come in, all this digital censorship, one of the conversations I was having this morning at a local community group was that how adaptable humans are, and that's one of our great strengths, is being adaptable. Do we go to old school ways of getting information out there, like, say, for example, the light newspaper, or back in the day they used to have tape trading, where they would physically mail video cassette tapes to other people across the country or across the world. Will we need to resort to that sort of stuff?
I expect that you and I will be sharing USB flash drives in the same way that not long ago we were using recordable DVDs to share movies, except this time it'll be memes. It'll be memes, it'll be statistics, it'll be censored and disappeared information. It'll be archivists that have managed to record things because our internet access, say we do access things that are incorrect, will be called into police officers or new administration officers to understand what the pattern of behavior that you seem to be exhibiting online is.
And the re-education, I can't wait till Richard is sitting there in a re-education camp.
As the teacher or the student?
As the student. and then they're going to tell him, Richard, no, it wasn't Mao Zedong and the Chinese. It was the Japanese, the evil Japanese, Richard. Why can't you get it through your head? The Chinese are loving people. They would communists especially would never do anything wrong.
Yep.
They only care about humanity. They want a one world, one environment where it's all peace and love. And those imperialistic Japanese, you can't trust them, mate.
Yeah, it sounds like an episode of Star Trek, some alternate reality.
I want this conversation to go over, but we should go forever, but we should wrap it up. But one final one. Dilmaz says Project Bluebeam.
Yep. Faked alien invasion in order to distract us. I don't know the details or the classified details of Project Bluebeam, but it has something to do with a manufactured alien invasion.
And will it happen?
Yeah.
Okay, I say it every single time. Please share this out if you found this interesting and you think other people will find it interesting as well. Please share it far and wide. Whether you have to put it in a cassette tape and mail it to someone in another country somewhere, just do it. We're going to have to do it one day anyway. Email you a flash drive of it down, strip it off the internet, whatever you have to do. Get this information out there. It would be greatly appreciated. If you want to stay up to date with everything, head to commandingthenarrative.com, hit that button up the top that says sign up, and you'll get a weekly newsletter and be able to keep up to date with everything. But thank you, Richard. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you for hosting us. Thank you for your lovely attire.
Thank you.
Chris, thank you very much. I love your analysis on things, whether it be on this podcast or elsewhere. I mean, as I said, I was listening to you on the radio this week, and I thought it was fantastic, your analysis. So thank you. And Paul, you're always amazing, mate. And I'm sure I'll have you back very, very soon. So thank you, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you all next time.